Hello, everyone. Thank you to those that are joining us live or watching the recording for being with us today. My name is Karen Kwasi, and I'm joined by my colleague, Catherine Johnson. We are representing the Educating All Learners Alliance content team. If you're unfamiliar with the Educating All Learners Alliance, or ELA, as we often call it, we are an uncommon coalition of organizations established in early 2020 as a result of COVID-19. With remote learning becoming the norm, we realized that there would be a gap in services provided for students with disabilities. Since then, we've gone on to establish an extensive resource library, produce podcasts and webinars like this, and many other resources to support educators as they support their students. A few months ago, we started this series where we share the top resources from the previous month within our resource library, and then we give theme resource recommendations that you can use for the following month. You can find the entire series as well as several other resources on our YouTube page called Educating All Learners, as well as our website, educatingalllearners.org. Since we are now in April, we will be providing you with our top resources for March, and this month's theme is focused on Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD. Since it is Autism Acceptance Month, we will provide recommendations to help educators support students with ASD. I will now pass it on to Catherine to get started on our case studies.
Thank you so much, Karen. Yes, I'm really excited about this month. We have a lot of really great resources for students with ASD. I'm excited to share them all with you. We'll go ahead and start with just the top resources that we saw in March 2022, meaning the top search, the top viewed resources from our resource library throughout the entire month of March. So these aren't specifically necessarily focused on ASD, but they are just kind of the ones that were most popular and most viewed, and wanted to share them out in case they are able to, help you with any similar topics or areas of interest. So we'll start. This first one was transforming the parent-child relationship in remote learning. And that was actually, I believe, one of our resources from a few months ago when we shared resources on transitioning to remote learning. So it was nice to see that that was a well-viewed resource that's up here in our top resources for March. It's all about a case study from Brittany Moser, who is an autism spectrum disorder coach at neighborhood charter schools in New York. Neighborhood charter schools are focused entirely on students with ASD, and forming a strong inclusive environment for them. So it's a great case study to start out with for this month. And in the case study, she shares how her different resources, tips and tricks for remote learning became a foundational launchpad for supporting families throughout the COVID pandemic. She also includes a really great list of activities and resources that families can use to ensure continuity for their children when transitioning to remote learning. So definitely worth a look. We encourage you to check that one out. Our next top resource was another case study called Student Leadership Makes an Inclusive Impact at Elizabethton High School. This was focused on two students at Elizabethton High School in Tennessee. During the summer of 2021, they formed partnership with their school leadership as well as district leadership to help direct how to spend and use federal relief dollars, specifically the ESSER funds. And it's a really good look into how student advocacy and student-centered voices can make a difference for their school and their community. So also a good one to read as well. Our next top resource is actually a recently published, just last month, resource from our friends at Digital Promise, as well as Brooklyn Lab Charter Schools. Individualized education plans, or IEPs, processes grounded in the science of learning and development. And it is an amazing resource that really is a good guide for how to embrace a whole child and strength-based approach to rethinking IEPs. It incorporates the latest research on learning and brain development to create and share different resources, reflection tools, and guidance to make sure that IEPs are holistic and inclusive. And our last top resource from March was a great handout called 5 Tips to Make Your Events, Meetings, and Webinars Accessible for Attendees with Disabilities. This was compiled from the ELA team, but also with a lot of great feedback and input from our partners at the Center for Learner Equity. It is an easy handout to go over how your event, meeting, and webinar can be accessible for all audiences. Includes ways to make transcriptions easily accessible, make sure the slides are all easy to read and understand. And it's just 5 quick tips. So we really encourage you to check that out. Make sure that all of the presentations and materials that you are using are accessible for attendees with disabilities. All right, so that rounds up our top resources from March, and we'll go ahead and move into our best practices for students with ASD. This is a great new resource from our partners at Understood. It's the Feelings Wheel and Facilitation Guide, and it's very easy to use, a great facilitation guide to help teachers understand how to be able to use that with their students. And the Feelings Wheel really, it just has both pictures and words, so you can use it at a wide range of age levels to help students understand and name their emotions. Really, really useful for students with ASD, as well as any students who don't yet have the words yet for emotions and would prefer to use pictures to help describe how they're feeling. Another one we definitely had to share was our Students with Autism Online Resources and Support resource. This covers a huge age level from kindergarten all the way up to post-secondary, and it covers different unique challenges and obstacles that students with ASD face. And the guide provides different steps to help educators find academic resources, any kind of support, and expert tips for school success at all different levels. Next up, we have Preparing Youth with Autism Spectrum Disorder for Adulthood, a transition toolkit. We know that this is such a crucial stage for a lot of students with ASD when they're moving from secondary to post-secondary education and training. So in order to assist educators to lead teams in developing an effective process to prepare students with ASD, this is an expanded core curriculum unit that provides basic answers to those frequently asked questions and links to comprehensive resources about different ways to prepare for education and training beyond high school. So definitely worth checking out, especially if you are working with students or you have a student with ASD who is in a high school or higher even level. This is a really wonderful resource called How to Calm Turbulent Transitions Back to In-Person Schools. As we all know, returning back to in-person school, or whenever you're transitioning from online to remote learning to in-person school hybrid, students with ADHD and ASD in particular, often it means disrupted routines, uncomfortable transitions, and emotional dysregulation. So these are just expert tips for both parents and educators to use social stories to smooth those rough spots, especially for younger children. And we always love the implementation of social stories, which is where we use illustrations to describe a situation or problem and then move on to problem solving. So it's a really great article about how to use social stories to smooth those kind of tough transitions in our students' lives. Next up, we have another case study called Nonverbal Students Find New Ways to Communicate with Along. This is all centered on Thompson Intermediate School in Houston, Texas, where they really try to prioritize students' social and emotional health. This case study goes into its middle schoolers in particular, revealed how they use Along, which is a free service to teachers and educators to help communicate with those teachers about experiencing stress and difficulties. The Thompson leadership team really decided to introduce Along as a way to prioritize their students' health. So it explores how that tool can help nonverbal students in particular prosper through all of these states of transition. So we definitely recommend checking that one out as well. Next up, we have a peer-to-peer supports for students with ASD communicating with college professors. So again, this is on the older age level spectrum for students who are transitioning to college or university out of high school. What we really love about this resource is that it is peer-to-peer. So it was designed by young adults with ASD for young adults with ASD, and it gives a lot of great overview and tips for communicating with college professors and how to navigate that change in students' lives. And our last resource for supporting students with ASD is supporting students with autism through uncertain times. This is another article that can be used by both families and educators, and it goes over 7 different strategies that can help support students with autism during these transitional times. In particular, on the bottom of this resource, there's a downloadable PDF that has in multiple languages that can provide really concrete, actionable strategies for both families and educators. And that will do it.
All right, well, thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today or for tuning into our webinar. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. We'll be providing access to all the resources that we mentioned today. And a follow-up, you can also find all of these resources on our site, educatingonlearners.org, and more videos like this, more webinars, more information on our YouTube channel as well, Educating All Learners. Thank you.